Good afternoon. We're on Daf Tzadi Amid Aleph. We're learning as a schus for Shlema Filan Chaya Baserach with 5 lines from the bottom. Tanan Hasam. Moiser Nesachim. Extra Nesachim. As it's going to turn out, it doesn't mean extra Nesachim themselves, but the money that you get from these Nesachim. And we'll see what does that mean, extra Nesachim, and what's exactly left over. It goes l'kayetz hamizbeach. We've seen l'kayetz hamizbeach. Kayetz is dessert that they would buy extra oilus whenever there was nothing going on in the mizbeach. They would put the oilus on. Use the oilus tzibur. That they would use the money to buy for the tzibur to keep the mizbeach going. So my moisa nesachim. What are these? What's the leftovers? Reb Chia bar Yosef Amar birutze midas, what we discussed earlier on the Amid. These are these extra. We had said, I think every shita was that it's not talking about the dry measures. It was talking about the liquid. You have a little bit of liquid that overflows and goes on to the brim, and we said that that's not kaddish. So that's they would pour it off to the
side. Where are you, Yaeli? Sorry.
5 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Amid Aleph. So these extra birutze midas, Reb Chia bar Yosef says they would sell them off, and they would use that to buy oilus l'kayetz hamizbeach. Doesn't seem like it was such a substantial amount, you wouldn't think, but yeah. So that's what's left over, and that's what they sell. It's a long taisus. It's very hard to understand how something that has a kedushas haguf, it gets kaddish from the kli, can then be sold. Usually, you have to wait for an animal to get a mum. I guess this is right away. It's as if it has a mum, and it could be sold off. But we'll see a little bit more about that later. But it remains a mystery exactly how this works. Not a mystery. It's a big lamdish sugya to how these are treated differently than other kachim. Rabbi Yochanan has a different way that they had extra monies or extra menachos from the nesachim. I shouldn't say menachos, the extra nesachim. Rabbi Yochanan Amar ka'isa sheshaninu. This is like what we said in a brayso. Makabel alav l'safek siltus me arba. Someone who said he took upon himself, I'm gonna get my name up in the on the wall in the dedication plaque that I'm giving the flower for the menachos, the minchas tzibur for the year. And at that time, you could get for 1 mana, you could get 4 sa'in of flour for amdu b'shalosh, and then the price went up that you can only get 3 sa'in of for the same mana. Yispek me arba. He's going to have to provide, even though he had, it was only going to cost him $100 to get all this siltus. Now, since it went up, the price went up by a third, he's going to have to give $133. So he's going to have to provide that. That means they buy the flour immediately. He gives his $100, or I shouldn't say that. They buy the flour. The gizbar buys the flour immediately for $100, and now, when he's coming to pay back for what they laid out for him, this person who made the dedication has to give an extra third because the current price of silas is more. So he has to pay according to the current price of silas. Meishalish v'amdu me'arba. But if it was the other way around, the price was more expensive and it went down, and they bought it, and now they're going to go buy it now, and it's going to be cheaper. So they're going to have to give. He's going to have to give either money, or he's going to have to give silas kafi, the current cheaper rate, even though they since he had originally promised to give more money, he was going to get the same 10 pounds of flour for, it was only going to be $100. It was going to be, I'm sorry, it was going to be $133, and now it's 100, and they can get it for 100. He's going to have to give extra money for that, or extra flour now to make it up. Misafek me'arba, he has to provide it for them at the cheaper price. Shiad hekdesh alal yoina, because hekdesh always has the upper hand. So therefore, in this second case, hekdesh is going to end up with extra money. So that is where the extra money comes from for the Kayetz HaMizbeach from the Minchas Nesachim. Tanya Kavasa de Reb Chia bar Yosef, Tanya Kavasa de Reb Yochanan, and we have prices to support each one. Tanya Kavasa de Reb Chia bar Yosef. Berutze midas halalu mayu oisem. And what did they do with the extra flour that was on the brims of the kalim? Im yesh zevach acher. If there's another carbon ready to go, another carbon sibur that, or this person has another carbon that needs nesachim, so they would use that for the other carbon. But if it was ready the next day after there would this birutzim were left over, yifsalu belina becomes possibilina. And if not, you sell. Then if it's once it's lawn, it becomes puzzle. Doesn't just become puzzle. It has to be burnt. It has to be disposed of. I guess they put it in the deshen. But if it wasn't lawn, if it didn't become puzzle, there's different shittas in the Rishonim. Some say even it doesn't. What it means to say is that you take if it's still before it became puzzle, you can sell it and then use that money l'kayetz hamizbeach. Or other shittas are that that even the next day it doesn't become puzzle, even though we say imlanu yifsalu, that it doesn't mean that it becomes puzzle mamish, that it can't be sold, and then you use that l'kayetz hamizbeach. Zaktavar v'kayetz zemau oilois habasel l'shem v'oiris l'kehanim. They bring oilus, and the basar gets burnt, and the iris go to the kehanim. So that's the brisa that says like Ruchia by Yosef that they use the beirut semitis. Tanya kavas Reb Yochanan hamakabel lav l'safik siltus me'arba v'am mishalas misafik misapik me'arba misapik me'arba mishalas v'am du me'arba misapik me'arba, like we said before. She had a hegshal yoina. Zeu sheshani u'maisu nesachim l'kayetz hamizbeach. So brises that pretty much repeat the shittas of the two amarot. Zok the Mishnah. Kol karbanos hatzibur v'hayachid to unin nesachim. All karbanis, generally the rule is a carbon, whether it's a carbon tzibur or carbon yachid, you have to bring it with nesachim, except for these exceptions, and there'll be exceptions to the exceptions, as is the way with the Babylonian Talmud. Chutz min habachar v'hamaiser v'hapesach v'hachatas v'ha'asham. These karbanis, these are all carbon yachid. The only one that sometimes you have a chatas that comes from a tzibur, but a bechar, there's no tzibur, there's no carbon bechar brought by the tzibur, or meisers from people's flocks. And Pesach obviously is brought by individuals, and the asham is also, if someone does an avera, they bring an asham. But the chatas is one carbon tzibur also that does not bring with it nisachim. Ella, the only exception to this exception is chatase shel mitzayra v'ashamoy, the chatas of a mitzayra and the asham of a mitzayra to un nesachim. The Torah says specifically there are nesachim for the chatas and the asham mitzayra. Okay, Tan Rabban, where does this come from? There's a brisa that will go back and forth and tell us which psukim tell us these dinim, and then we're going to go through the brisa piece by piece in the Gemara. Tan Rabban, vasisem ishel Hashem. Let's look at this whole pasuk. Vasisem ishel Hashem. You should make a carbon to Hashem, something you burn to Hashem. Oilo, oizevach, a carbon oilo, or a carbon. Lefali neder, benedava, to fulfill his neder that he made, or nedava, or on Yom Tif, lasas reich nichayach Hashem, to make a reich nichayach, to make a pleasing aroma, min habakar min atzayin, from a bakar or tzayin. There's a lot of things in this pasuk, and each one of them is going to be analyzed. So, Zok the Gemara. Yachol kala oila liishim yeitar nesachim. I might think there are no exceptions, and our Mishnah started off saying everything needs a nesachim, and that's what this pasuk is telling you. This pasuk is saying that that you bring nesachim. That's going to be the end of that pasuk. So yeah, so I might think everything Yachal Kol Oil Ishim, right? The start Vasisam Ishel Hashem, any carbon should need Nesachim. Vafilu Mincha, even someone who brings a standalone mincha, a person can dedicate, say, I'm just bringing a mincha. Maybe that mincha also needs Nesachim. Maybe you pour wine together with it. Tamilayma Oila. That the Torah says Oila, something that's a Oila, not a carbon Oila. Like a carbon oila, that it's brought as a carbon, not a mincha. It has to come along with something else. It's telling you that it has to be with a carbon, with an animal carbon, not a mincha. Shlama minayin. So how do we know that a carbon shlamim also needs nesachim? The pasuk said oila, it didn't say shlamim. So once it said oila, maybe it means only an oila. Oila is the only thing that has nesachim. Tamaloi mezevach. That Torah says a zevach. Zevach means any albacom. So the first oila is a miyat to be mamayit mincha, and zevach is a riboy to include shlamim. Toida minayin, right? We said everything needs except for the things that were listed in the Mishnah. Taida was not one of the things listed in the Mishnah, so it's included that it does need nesachim. So we said oila, we said shlamim. How do we know Taida? Taida is a very close relative of a shlamim, but it is not a shlamim. Tamilayma oizevach. So it's not just zevach, oizevach. So that's telling you something in addition to zevach, in addition to the shlamim, also the Taida. Yachshin marba af bechar u'maiser u'pesach. How do we know not to include all the things that the Mishnah excluded? How do we know they're excluded, in other words? It's only something which is generally, if you think about it, that's what the rule is ending up being. Those things that can be brought as a neder or nedava have nesachim. All the things that we listed, you can't bring a chatas as a nedava. You can't bring a pesach as a nedava. All these things are requirement. And ashram is required. A bechar and meiser. All these things are things that you are required to bring. Mashmal hoitzias elu. Sagt the Gemara. I'm sorry. Baba nedava tonasach. She'ena ba beneder. Umredavar eintain nesachim. Mashma lahaitzias elu. That's coming to tell you we're excluding those things that are chayva. Oitzias chayvas haboyes machmas haregel beregel. So Gemara says once we're excluding things that are required, there are other things that are requirements in addition to the exclusions that we mentioned in the Mishnah. There are things that you have to bring, the tzibur has to bring, or even individuals have to bring on the regel. There's two, you have to bring an oila and a shlam. When you go to the Beis HaMikdash on the regel, in addition to the carbon pesach, there's also the chagiga, right? There's a whole masechta about it. And there's also the oila shriya that you have to bring. And those are requirements. But they're not listed in the Mishnah as excluded from the Sachim. So maybe they should also be included if we're making it a question of whether it's a chayva or a nedava. Tamalayma oy b'mayadechem. Right? The Mishnah said, the pasuk says, in addition to those in the list, one of the things that says b'mayadechem, the things you bring on mayadechem, kol haba b'mayadechem ton nesachim. With that which is required by the mayadechem also needs nesachim. Mashma lahavias elu. So it's coming to tell you these karbanos that are brought on the mayad, even though they're required, they still need nesachim. So what about the seirei chatas that are also brought on Yom Tif? That That's part of the musafim that you bring a seer as a chatas. Hayelu bayin chayvis regel, since they were on the Yom Tov. Tamalayim v'chisasa ben baka. The Torah says this is a different pasuk. It's not the same pasuk we read, but it's a couple of psukim later. V'chisasa ben baka oiloi zevach l'fali neder ishlamim lashem. So it says specifically ben baka. Ben baka b'chlal hayu v'lama yatsa. Why did the Torah say? We already said zevach. We said all animals. Why are we saying ben baka specifically? Lakash alav ma ben baka miyuchad ba b'neder and davar. Afkol ba b'neder and davar. It has to be something that can be brought as a neder davar. So that excludes the seirei chatas, since a chatas is never brought as a neder and a davar. So even when it's brought b'mayadechem, it's excluded. So we have a lot of competing rules. So we start with the general rule that those things that are nedavas need, and those things that are chayvis do not need nesachim. Then we say mayid, the karbonis that are brought on mayid, even though they're mechayiv, they do need nesachim. We learn it out from a pasuk, but we exclude those things that are required to be brought on Yom Tov that are also in the category of chatas. Chatas is always required. It's not just required al Yom Tov; it's required on its own. That's excluded from nesachim. The pasuk says, so back to our original pasuk. What is this coming to tell you? The end of the pasuk. What does it tell you? Since the Torah says specifically, I would think even you have to bring the sachem together with a bird oila. Rabbi Yeshia says this pasuk is to exclude oila sa'if. Rabbi Yonason has a different view. It's not necessary to exclude the oila sa'if. It could be excluded from the plain taich of the pasuk. We already said zevach, which means an animal, meaning a walking animal, not a flying animal. So we don't need this extra bakar and oitzain to exclude it. So what is it for? He says it's used for a different limit. So this is a third pasuk. Dabal bnei Yisrael matalim adam ki yakum ichem karban l'Hashem min habehema min habakom min hatzayin takrivu es karbanchem. Yachal ha'omer harei alei oila yavi mishneim. Since the Torah says min habehema min habakom min hatzayin, it sounds like it's saying you have to bring, when you want to decide you want to bring a oila, you got to bring both a bakar and a tzayin. You got to bring a pair. Tamalayim min habakar oy min hatzayin. So our pasuk says, with the I instead of with the vav, to tell you it's a either or, it's not a and. That you can bring either a bakar or a tzayin. Ratza echad, maybe ratza shnai, maybe. Bring one, you can bring two, it's up to you. It's not required to be both. So that is what Rabbi Yonason learned out, as opposed to Rabbi Yeshua, who learned out to exclude, that it's coming to exclude an oif. Rabbi Yonason, lamali kra, Frekta Gemara, Rabbi Yonason, who's saying it's coming to tell you that you don't have to bring two. What do you need a pasuk? He says that whenever the Torah gives you a list of things, we always look at it as two separate things. Even when the Torah says, we're assuming now at this point, even when we list a couple of things, each one is looked at separately unless the Torah specifically says there that you need both. So what do you need a pasuk? What are you looking? You're looking quizzical.
Yeah, because first the Gemara went ahead and asked it as a question. All right. In other words, I need a pasuk to tell me. I would have thought that I need to bring both. And now we're saying Lamali Kra.
Right, because of this reason. He's saying we would have thought you need both because the pasuk says min habakar u'min hatzayin.
Right.
But Rabbi Yonason, Belachayra, there's Rabbi Yonason himself holds of this rule of scriptural interpretation that says, as a general rule, whenever the Torah lists a number of things, this is his rule. It's not just the kasha. So saying, why don't you apply the rule here and say that since we don't say bedafka, that it means each one separately. The Gemara says, says, no, this is Yachtav. That is Yachtav. Sagt the Gemara, Rabbi Yoshe Dama Avagav the loy ksiv Yachtav commande ksiv Yachtav Dami. According to Rabbi Yoshe, that he says it's always considered as if they're together. Liboikra. Why doesn't he have what is he gonna? Where's he gonna learn out the din of Rabbi Yonasan? He doesn't agree. Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yoshe happen to have shitas, which is, I forgot exactly where it is. I think it's by Nadarim that their way of interpreting is exactly the opposite of what you would expect over here. It's Lagabi, actually it's Lagabi Mimkal of Ve'imai. It's Mimkal of Ve'imai, both of them or just one of them. So they have the opposite cheetahs of what they are saying over here. According to Rabbi Yeshia, we always assume that they're together. So how does he know that you don't need both a bakar and a tzayin? Sagt the Gemara. The reason I'm having got like Yakim and Ksiv Yachta Dami Liboikra, Haksivim Oila Karbonai Mina Bakar, the Im Minat Tzayin Karbonai. Since we have two psukim that separate them, where we say one time bakar separately, and then we have another pasuk that says tzayin separately, so that is saying that they can be brought separately. The pasuk is it's not a drasha, so to speak, but it's the Torah is saying it that they each stand on their own; they don't have to be brought together. V'idach itztrach. I guess the Gemara is sort of learning it as a riboy because it's saying what. So once we have that, what do we need our pasuk for? What does he do? What does Rabbi Yonasan do with Rabbi Yoshia's raya? That which the pasuk says that you bring them separately. That's where the person said, "I'm bringing an oila of a tzayin or I'm bringing an oila of a bakar." Then he could bring them separately. That's what the Torah says when it lists them separately. Alva b'stama laisi mitravayu. But maybe if he just says, I'm bringing an oila, maybe the stamius it means including both of them. Kamash Malon, so that's why he needed his pasuk. Rabbi Anderson needed his pasuk. That's what he used with our pasuk, our drasha over here, minabaka minatzayin, to tell you that they're separate. Amar Mar. Toida minayim. Right, we started from the beginning. This is the beginning of the brisa. So the brisa said, "Where do you know a taida?" Talmud loyma oizevach. So the Torah says oizevach. That's to be marba the taida. Practical Gemara atu taida lav zevachu. Why did we need a separate pasuk? Once we said zevach, we said that tells you shlom. But how do we know the taida? But why isn't the taida also zevach? It's sakadachamina haylik lechem bahada loitibayich nesachem. Since there's lechem that's brought with the taida, it already has something coming along with it, so it doesn't need also nesachem. What about the ayil nazir that the Torah says behedja that it needs nesachem, and that also has in it two types of lechem, the lechem that comes with the ayil nazir, and even so it does need nesachem. So why would I think that a taida as a rule would be excluded because of its lechem? Arba minim. I might think, listen, two minim that you have by ayil, that's not enough to not necessitate nesachem. But the taida, which has, as we know, the one type of chametz and the three types, 10 of each of the three types of chametz chalas, maybe that is such a significant side accessory offering that it doesn't need nesachem as well. Okay, I think we'll stop over here. And this is it's a lot for today, for evening, and we'll continue tomorrow from here.
Wonderful.
The new thing. Okay,
All
Shkaya,
right.
thank you.
Thank you so
Listen,
much. Very nice.
it's only 25 minutes, but it probably would have taken me, the first 15 minutes tomorrow. I did a little slower, gave me a little peace of mind. Thank you so much.
Shkach.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care. Have a